This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 420, entitled Masculist Rage at Feminazi Hypocrisy. Description. This video describes the growing rage coming from the masculists when confronted with the level of hypocrisy of the monoconscious feminists, when the feminists complain about the relatively minor ways that men oppress women, but know nothing of the much greater ways that women oppress men, especially with their awful decades-long man-slavery, etc. As millions of men become masculists, there will be large numbers of bitter confrontations between monoconsciously ignorant feminists and very angry BIconscious masculists. The fire itself. Masculist Rage at Feminazi Hypocrisy by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. As a masculist, each time I come across feminist anger at men for the ways that men oppress women, yet consider how much worse that women oppress men, in brackets, financial parasitism, man-slavery, fluffy feminist hypocrisy in the divorce courts, many decades-lasting gender crimes against men, etc., close brackets, the angrier I become at the level of hypocrisy of these feminists. Mind you, they do have an excuse, and it's partly masculist fault, and that is ignorance, that is monoconscious feminazi ignorance. Take the case of a typical feminist, say of age 40 or so, that is the median age, more or less, of feminists. She has spent her whole life with feminist ideas preached to by feminist authors and journalists, that gender oppression is a one-way street, that the gender oppressors are men, that men are rapists, that men are toxic, because it is men who commit the violent crimes and start the wars that cause millions to suffer. As a masculist, I don't deny that there's a lot of truth to what the feminists are saying, but from the masculist perspective, it's only half the story. There is also the other half, the male half, the masculist half. Once one has become BIconscious, that is, one has had one's feminist and one's masculist consciousnesses raised, one becomes aware that women oppress men far worse than vice versa. For example, the major gender crimes committed by women against men mentioned above. So how does a BIconscious masculist react towards monoconscious feminazi misandry when he, in brackets, usually a he, but increasingly a she, as masculist ideas spread across the planet, close brackets, is confronted by monoconscious feminazi ignorance? Usually he gets angry, feeling disgusted with the sheer hypocrisy of the monoconscious feminists, who feel fully justified in being angry at men because they feel that women have plenty of reason to be angry at men. Women only have to read the feminist literature, book after book, magazine article after magazine article, to have their monoconscious feminist attitudes reinforced. They feel comfortable in their misandry, their feminist-based critique of men, of men's personalities and attitudes. Lately, feminism has spread so widely amongst young women that the movie industry is profiting from this rise, pitching feminist-themed movies at young female movie-goers, who are now the majority, outnumbering young men. Since movies are the main source of ideas, trends, fashions, attitudes, etc. for most people, a vicious circle has been set up, since the more feminist movies there are, the more monoconscious young women, and not so young women, become. The feminist snowball is thus well and truly rolling. The above, from the monoconscious feminist point of view, makes plenty of sense, so this reality will just have to be accepted for the time being by the masculists, particularly by those masculists who are aiming to make society aware, brackets, including women, especially monoconscious feminists, close brackets, that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that in reality women oppress men far worse than vice versa, and that society needs to be told of this fact so that men can be liberated in their billions from being man-slaves to women, an affliction that lasts decades. Once a man has had his masculinist consciousness raised, he sees the world differently from the way he did before. Masculism is like a religion to men, the way feminism is to women. That is, providing men with a worldview, a set of ideas to guide their lives. Instead of seeing the traditional role of a man as working for decades for a woman so that she can stay at home raising her kids in the house he pays for, he sees women as having a career window of half a century, so thinks, as masculists do, that now that women can work, they must work. Anything else is manslavery, and to a masculist, manslavery is slavery, and slavery is hated. So masculists have a hatred of fluffies, that is, traditional women who expect to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man, manslaving him for decades. To masculists, when they hear feminists harping on about their relatively minor issues, these masculisted men lose patience and feel a real contempt for the level of hypocrisy of these ignorant, monoconscious feminists who behave as feminazis towards men, especially in the divorce courts, which on a daily basis treat men as cash machines to be abused and robbed, paying for fluffy parasite ex-wives so that she can continue to parasite off her ex-husband after the divorce the way she did before the divorce. With one father in four being financially crucified and having his life destroyed, it's not surprising that masculists have such a hatred for fluffy manslaving parasites and an even greater hatred for the fluffy feminists who see men as cash machines, who abuse men so badly that if they continue doing this, a sex war will come. That is, men, masculine soldiers, will pick up arms and assassinate the gender politicians who created these deeply misandrous gender laws in the first place, murder thousands of fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges, and even go into the streets and shoot millions of fluffy feminists. Since the toxicity of the divorce courts, created by the fluffy feminists in all their hypocrisy, have made divorce, and hence marriage and paternity, so toxic that in many countries now 2/3 of young men refuse to marry, reject paternity, and choose to live the MGTOW lifestyle. In brackets, MGTOW, MGTOW equals men going their own way. That is, refusing to marry, rejecting paternity, and spending money on themselves. Close brackets. These fluffy feminists who dominate the divorce courts are thus indirect genociders, since they are the major cause why the birth rate is plummeting so badly now. They are indirectly wiping out whole populations, making them indirect genociders, so have to be stopped, with bullets if necessary, since when the very survival of populations is threatened, they often go to war to remove the source of their demise. Well-informed masculists who are BIconscious understandably feel a real contempt for the hypocritical monoconscious ignorance of the fluffy feminists and take advantage of haranguing them with masculist rhetoric and ideas when the opportunity arises. Masculists have been spreading their ideas over the internet for years now, so that there are now millions of masculists and MGTOWs who are well informed as to how women oppress men. Most masculists know, for example, that women, even those who stay at home looking after their 2 small kids for 6 years until the second kid is off to kindergarten, has a career window of some half a century given her 85 years female life expectancy. To masculists, manslavery is a moral abomination, comparable to the moral abomination felt towards the slavers of Negroes in the southern states of the US in the 1800s by the abolitionists of the northern states of the US. Masculists see themselves as the 21st century equivalent of the abolitionists of the 19th century. To the abolitionists, Negro slavery was a moral abomination and a war issue. To 21st century masculists, manslavery of men by fluffy parasites is also a moral abomination and a war issue. To masculists, manslavery is hugely a greater gender crime against men than, say, rape by men is against women. Rape, which is one of the worst crimes that men commit against women, is small potatoes in comparison to manslaving a man for decades, which is what even modern monoconscious feminists expect from men. Monoconscious feminists, by definition, have had their feminist consciousness raised, but not their masculist consciousness raised, so by default continue to have traditional expectations towards men. Quote,
"Seeing men as cash machines, existing on this earth to pay for women to have babies."
This expectation is deeply ingrained in women. Most women feel it is their right to have their own manslave, who will devote decades of his life working for her, being her manslave, doing what she wants, just to get a bit of sex from her from time to time. This is the end of part 1.